All right, welcome back to We Talk Tech. We have a very illuminating subject today. The two guys I have with me, you know them well, Ian and Taylor, are going to ensure that we have a blast. We're talking about IR blasters today, guys.
I think IR blasters are really excellent because they are a way to interact with equipment which isn't necessarily brand new. IR or infrared technology is, I don't know how old, but anything built in the last 2 decades or two. In the last decade or so, maybe 2 or 3 decades actually, that comes with a remote is almost certainly using infrared to communicate. And that makes it an excellent system for us to tap into with these IR blasters and then integrate it with the smart home systems that we offer at Technology for Living.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we had a wonderful device years ago called the Logitech Harmony Hub, which has been discontinued, which is really unfortunate because it was so easy to set up and quite versatile. But moving forward, I think something to consider is that a lot of other devices come with IR functionality nowadays, like the Aqara M2 hub has a built-in IR blaster just as an extra feature. And it works well with a number of devices. Think about having a remote, a virtual remote on your phone or your tablet, and you can choose from a list from their own database of different devices like Samsung and LG, etc. Or if it's not on the list, then you can hold your conventional remote up to it and program in different codes, which is really nice.
Yeah, and that Aqara hub, Ian, it's not even the sole purpose of the hub, is it? The hub does so much more. This is just kind of something they allowed it to do on the side, kind of.
Yeah, and a lot of companies are doing that, like Flick. Also, their hub, you can connect an IR blaster to it. Even SwitchBot, their hub, or one of their hubs has IR functionality. You can even buy really inexpensive hubs from companies like Tria, which are very similar. But I think today we should really focus on the ones that are the easiest to use, because some of them are quite complex.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the Harmony Hub, and that's a device we used for a long time. And one of the best features about the Harmony Hub was that it had this humongous library of infrared codes and companies that it worked with. So it was very seamless when you were programming it and worked quite well through voice assistants. And I think one of the other ones we're using now, which is very similar to the Harmony Hub, probably doesn't have the same library as Harmony did or does, is probably the BroadLink. And I know, Taylor, you use the BroadLink RM4 Pro, I believe. Why don't you tell us about that one?
Yeah, I have used both the BroadLink RM4 Pro as well as the Harmony Hub before it was discontinued. And I would say they're very similar. However, I think the Broadlink was definitely developed for the Asian market and then brought over here to North America. It still works well, but I think a lot of the devices listed in its catalog are clearly from brands which I've certainly never heard of. Whereas the Harmony Hub is very much geared for our North American market, in that it even works with a lot of the cable providers here in North America, even Canada, which is often an afterthought for a lot of companies, stuff here in the Great Frozen North. But unfortunately, with the Harmony Hub being discontinued, the Broadlink is a great option, and it definitely includes a lot of devices that we have here in North America. I know at one time I was using it with an air conditioning unit, which was quite interesting. That I was just able to search for the brand name and model of my air conditioning unit in the app, and there it was. I installed it. It basically created a virtual clone on my phone of the remote. So I had all of the same buttons, the functionality, and I was also able to integrate it with my preferred voice assistant and use voice commands to operate that AC unit. I'm not using it with the AC unit currently, but I am using it with my bed, actually, believe it or not, which has built-in infrared connectivity. So I send commands from my voice assistant through the BroadLink IR blaster to my bed to make various adjustments, which is really, really convenient throughout the night where I'm not positioned in a way which I can interact with the physical controls for the bed, but I can still issue voice commands. And that makes it a really, really great option for operating the bed. And um, this bed is a fairly niche product built right here in British Columbia, actually. So it's not part of the catalog of devices supported by the BroadLink. But that was no problem at all because you can teach the BroadLink what commands are to be expected from your remote by just pointing the remote at your IR blaster and then teaching it, which is really, really convenient. So um, even though it may not feature, it probably features hundreds of thousands of different devices. It might not feature yours if it's especially new, especially old, or very unique. Overall, I'm very pleased with it. I find it very reliable. I use it probably dozens of times a day, mostly overnight, just to make adjustments, and it very rarely drops out, and I can't for certain attribute any failings to it. It might be, maybe the voice assistant didn't quite interpret my commands correctly. So I find it a very reliable device, and um, it's a very nice addition to my smart home.
Absolutely. And one last question about that, and I should have asked you too, Ian, is how is the range on the Broadlink? Just do you find that you have to be fairly close with the device, or is it across the room?
Oh, I think infrared. I would not be concerned about the range in anything but uh, if you're maybe one of our wealthier members with their own private theater that's maybe hundreds of feet long, you might be concerned then. But I think in any standard size room, I would not be concerned about being able to reach all of your appliances. And oftentimes, you don't even need to have um, they don't need to be necessarily pointed directly at each other, as I know that infrared can bounce off of different surfaces. It might be a little bit temperamental if you're trying to reach far or around corners, but I've had zero issues with any range constraints or location constraints. Um, but admittedly, I do have the receiver for my bed and the Broadlink positioned about maybe 10 centimeters from each other. So maybe I'm not the best guess or best judge.
Okay, yeah, it usually pretty good range, and as you mentioned, it can like reflect off of walls in the room, which usually is a good thing. But be careful because if there are, let's say, two Samsung TVs that are within close proximity of one another, then you might accidentally be turning up the volume on both of them. So it's something to keep in mind when you're positioning the device.
Right. That's something we actually run into at TIL quite often when we go into say, long-term care facilities where there's two or three beds in a room and they just put up the same Shaw box and the same TV in the same room, and it's like the curtain might stop it, but typically not. Right? There's always that issue in those cases. So the next thing we wanted to talk about was the Bond. Bond Bridge is a device that we've used here at TIL for for a couple of years now, and the main attraction of that is teaching it certain radio frequency codes. So if you have a ceiling fan that has a radio frequency remote, or really anything that has an RF remote within certain radio frequency bands, you can teach that remote into the Bond bridge and then use it either in the app itself or through your voice assistant of choice. And we've been looking at it because it also does have infrared capabilities. So in testing it, we don't use it a lot with members, and this is why. In testing it, each IR command needs to be set up in the device like its own appliance. So if you want to program TV power, you have to make it its own appliance, and that can be frustrating when you are using the app to control the device. You have to go into the appliance and then press power or whatever function you have it set as within the device. Now I'm sure it would probably work better through voice assistant, but I think we have better devices out there to operate the audio video equipment.
Yeah, I think the Bond bridge it works really well for certain applications. Like I know some of our members have had issues with their ceiling fan not being able to pair with any other IR or RF blaster, and so the Bond bridge is perfect in those situations. But if you wanted to program it for all of the functions on your TV remote, it might not be the best solution.
All right, and the final one we wanted to bring up, we kind of left it till the end because I think it's the one we use the most here at TIL. It's really quite robust, and that is the Amazon Fire Cube. And I know you guys both have experience with the Fire Cube. So Taylor, why don't we start with you?
I think it's a really great product overall. Aside from the infrared functionality, I think it's a powerful little device. You'll never have problems streaming any kind of content, and it's particularly for myself and our membership. What I think is its just singular best feature that is I think unique to it is the ability to direct the entirety of the interface using your voice. There's some small caveats when it comes to cable boxes. But if you're just navigating the interface for the actual Fire TV Cube, like through streaming services, you can use your voice to navigate that entirely by issuing commands such as go up, go down, select, go back, or to open specific apps. When it comes to operating your various infrared devices, I'll let Ian talk a little bit more about that. Because I'm primarily using it just to control the kind of related devices such as the TV and sound system, to turn them off and on and adjust the volume, and maybe even changing the inputs on some of them. But that's how I'm using it, and that's a very basic use case, but I find it's extremely reliable. And again, through using voice control, that's primarily how I'm using it. So I can issue commands like turn on the sound system or turn off the TV and stuff like that. But maybe Ian can tell us a little bit more about the experience of using it as an IR blaster for your cable box.
Yeah, I really like it. As you mentioned, it's not perfect. There are some workarounds, but with the latest generation Fire TV Cube, it has an HDMI input and an output. So you plug the TV into the Fire TV Cube, and then your cable box also into the Fire TV Cube. And that's a really neat feature, like to be able to access your cable box. For example, I use TELUS here in British Columbia, and through the Fire TV interface, I can access Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and Netflix, but also cable. I can ask it by voice to tune into a Discovery Channel or a specific number, channel 100, for example, and it will switch over to the cable box, which is great. You can also, by voice, open up the guide and navigate up, down, left, and right. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to actually press select, which is a little bit of an oversight. Yeah, but there is a workaround to that. We can create some routines. Yeah, or if you know the channel that you want to go to, you can say, as I mentioned, switch to the channel number. But overall, I think it's the best device that we have at this time for controlling your TV, your soundbar, and whatever you'd like to watch on television.
Right. And another interesting feature of it is it actually has Alexa built in, right? So
Yes.
you don't need to have another Dot or Echo Show around. But I guess there's some cases where you might have an extra Dot or Show to control it.
Yeah, if the Fire TV Cube is let's say wired into your television across the room, then you can use something like an Echo Dot beside the bed to control it, which is really nice because sometimes it's hard for, like, the Fire TV Cube itself. It's hard for it to understand me from across the room, even though they have improved the microphones. It's not perfect, especially if you have the TV on and it's quite loud, then it's competing. So it is a really nice feature to be able to talk to another Amazon device at the bedside or beside the couch to relay the message.
The microphones have improved considerably from the first generation of the Fire TV Cube through to the second generation, which is what's currently on the market, and I believe what we're currently providing. There's a significant difference, which was immediately noticeable to me when I went from first generation to second generation, because I know, like you said, Ian, it can be difficult to be heard by the Fire TV Cube. And that was a common complaint that I heard from people. But there are workarounds if necessary, like that second Echo Dot. But the second generation definitely has far superior microphones and ability to hear. So I'm happy to see that.
All right. And Ian, you had mentioned something else to us before the show, and that was something called Web Remote. And this is, I guess, for people who maybe don't want to or can't use voice assistants, but are able to use their computer still. Just tell us a little bit about Web Remote.
Yeah, I'm not using it personally, but it looks great. It works on. Let me bring up the website so I don't make any mistakes here. But it works for Xfinity, Shaw, and Cox, and it is a web interface. So you can go to the website, sign into your account on your phone or tablet or computer, and then this giant remote pops up on the computer screen, which I think would be really good for people using eye control, like eye gaze. This would be a fantastic way to operate your television.
Well, yeah, thank you both for sharing all that information. I think TV is always going to be one of the most popular things, one of the most popular requests from TIL members, and just having these different options available is hopefully gonna help find solutions for them. And I know it's not always easy, but we try, right?
Awesome. And as always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time.